I grew up in a house where everyone seemed to belong, except me. My mom found love again. My sisters were adored, even his son was treated like gold. But I was the extra piece, the mistake, the burden no one wanted. This is what it feels like to grow up invisible in your own family. I don't really know how to start this, but the words keep circling in my head and I need to let them out somewhere. Maybe here, maybe with strangers, because I can't say any of this at home without being dismissed, ignored, or punished for. Even daring to field out the question I keep asking myself every night is simple, but it eats away at me more than anything else. Why do I have to be the burden? I'm 15 years old, not an adult, not a child anymore either. And yet I feel like I've been carrying weights on my shoulders long, before I was even old enough to understand what they were. My parents used to fight all the time when I was younger, the kind of fights that make walls shake and turn silence into something scarier than yelling. I never fully understood what was wrong between them, but I could feel it. I could feel the tension at the dinner table, the way my mom's eyes seemed tired all the time, and the way my dad's voice grew sharper, heavier, as if even being in the same room as us became too much for him. When the divorce happened, it wasn't a shock. I think deep down I always knew it was coming. What did shock me was how much it broke me anyway. People say kids are resilient, that we adapt, that we'll be fine. But no one tells you what it's like to be 15 and suddenly split between two people who couldn't even look at each other anymore. My mom got custody of me and my two younger sisters. My dad faded out of my life in a way that hurt more than if he had just slammed the door and left for good. He called less and less until it felt like he decided he couldn't handle fatherhood anymore, at least not with me. Those first months after the divorce were hard. Money was tight. My mom worked long hours. I had to grow up fast, helping with my sisters, doing things I thought older brothers just naturally did. But looking back, I realized I was being forced into a role that no one prepared me for. I told myself it was okay, that I had to be strong, that one day things would get better, and for a moment, it looked like they did doubt my mom met someone new. He was everything my dad wasn't, or at least, that's how she describes him at first, charming, successful, the kind of man who dressed well, spoke with confidence, and seemed to have his life in perfect order. He had money, which meant suddenly, our lives looked shinier, better clothes, better food, a nicer house. My mom looked happier than I'd ever seen her, like she had been waiting her whole life for someone to sweep her off her feet and tell her she deserved more than just survival. And for my sisters, it was like stepping into a dream. They adored him, he adored them, he had this way of spoiling them, making them feel special. Like princesses for them, he was the father they had lost, then some. He also had a young son of his own and I watched the way he treated him with patience, warmth, pride. It was like his son was his whole world. But for me, I wasn't part of that world. I was the piece that didn't fit from the very beginning. There was a wall between us, a wall he built brick by brick, without even trying to hide it. His eyes when they landed on me were colder than I can explain. His words, when he bothered to use them, were short and clipped. He never yelled at my sisters, never raised his voice at his son, but with me, he always found a reason. A dish not washed right, homework left on the table, a look he didn't like on my face. Suddenly I was the problem, the inconvenience, the reminder of something broken in the perfect picture he was trying to create with my mom, and the worst part is, my mom doesn't see it. Or maybe she does and she chooses not to. Asterisk after the divorce. Life felt like living inside a storm that never stopped. There were no steady days, no sense of calm. My mom tried so hard to keep everything together, but I could see the exhaustion pulling at her. She was suddenly responsible for 3 kids, bills piling up, rent that kept eating away at what little she made, and a sadness that clung to her no matter how much she smiled at us. For me, being the oldest meant I had to step up. I became the one who made sure my sisters got ready for school. I packed their lunches, walked them to class, tried to distract them when they cried for dad. At 15, I was already parenting more than I should have been, but I kept telling myself that maybe if I worked hard enough, things would get better. Maybe mom would smile more. Maybe dad would call more. Maybe the house wouldn't feel so heavy all the time. But dad didn't call. Not really. His excuses got shorter and less believable. He was busy. He forgot. Sometimes he promised he'd visit and then never showed up. My sisters cried, and I hated him for making them cry, but I also hated myself for missing him too. I didn't know if I had the right to miss someone who clearly didn't want me around. We were stuck in this small apartment, sharing space, sharing silence, and surviving more than we were living. I thought that was going to be our life forever, and then everything changed. Asterisk when my mom met him. It was like a light switch flipped. She laughed again, dressed up again, came home humming sometimes instead of dragging her feet. Suddenly there were dinners out, flowers on the table, a spark in her that I hadn't seen in years. I should have been happy for her, and part of me was, but another part of me felt uneasy. Like something was shifting in a way I couldn't control. He came into our lives like a knight in shining armor. At least, that's how mom saw him. He was wealthy, confident, and made her feel like the center of the universe. He didn't just date her. He swooped in and filled the empty spaces of our lives with things we didn't even know we could have. New clothes, trips to the movies, a bigger house in a nicer neighborhood. Suddenly, my sisters had bedrooms painted in pastel colors with matching furniture. Toys they'd never dreamed of before. A father figure who doted on them like they were his. And he had his own son, a little boy, younger than me, who followed him around like a shadow. The way he looked at his son, it was pure pride, unconditional love. I watched that look every day, and it hurt in a way I can't even describe. Because I never saw it directed at me. Not once. Asterisk, it didn't take long for me to realize that whatever kindness he showed my mom, my sisters, or his son, none of it was meant for me. From the very first week, there was something different in the way he treated me. It was subtle at first, cold glances, silence when I entered the room, little comments under his breath that stung even if they weren't outright cruel. Then it got louder, sharper. I couldn't do anything right in his eyes if I left my homework on the kitchen table. It was me being messy if I forgot to take out the trash. It was me being lazy if I spoke up about something. It was me being disrespectful. He never raised his voice at his son, never scolded my sisters, but with me. It was like he had been waiting his whole life to have someone to unload his anger onto. I tried to convince myself I was imagining it, that maybe I was being insensitive, that maybe if I tried harder, smiled more, stayed out of his way, kept my room spotless, did every chore without being asked, maybe then he'd see me differently. But the truth is, it didn't matter what I did. I could have been perfect, and it still wouldn't have been enough. Because to him, I wasn't his son. I wasn't his responsibility. I wasn't even someone worth tolerating. And my mom, she didn't see it, or maybe she didn't want to. She was so wrapped up in this new life he gave her, so blinded by the stability she thought she finally found, that she brushed off everything. If I told her he was harsh with me, she said I was exaggerating. If I told her he treated me differently than the others, she said I was being dramatic. So I stopped telling her. I stopped telling anyone. Asterisk, that's when the words started forming. In my head, burden. That's what I felt like every single day in that house, a burden to him. To my mom, even to my sisters sometimes. They didn't see what I saw. They didn't feel the rejection I felt. To them, he was amazing, funny, generous, kind. They couldn't understand why I kept shrinking further into myself. Why I stopped talking at dinner. Why I spent more time in my room than with them. The truth was simple. I wasn't wanted. Not by him, not by my mom when it came to defending me, not even by my dad, who had already faded out of the picture. And when you're 15, trying to figure out who you are, and the people who are supposed to love you make you feel like an intruder in your own home, it changes something inside you. It twists you into believing that maybe they're right. Maybe you really are the problem. Maybe you really are the burden. The difference in the way he treated us was impossible to ignore. My sisters became his little angels. He'd come home with shopping bags filled with toys or new clothes just for them. He'd kneel down, hug them, tell them how smart and beautiful they were. His son was practically glued to his side, in every ounce of his patience. Every smile, every bit of fatherly love I secretly craved but never got me. I was invisible at best. At worst, I was a mistake out at the dinner table. He'd ask everyone how their day was. He'd laugh with my sisters, listen to his son's endless stories about school. But when it came to me, the only words directed my way were corrections or criticisms. If I didn't eat fast enough, I was being rude. If I finished quickly, I was being wasteful. If I didn't say anything, I was sulking. If I did speak, it was backtalk. There was no winning. Holidays and birthdays made it worse. On Christmas morning, the living room was filled with wrapping paper, laughter, and shiny new gifts. My sisters tore through stacks of boxes, each one filled with something carefully chosen just for them. His son had so many presents it looked like a store display. And me, a sweater, maybe a book. Something that felt more like an obligation than a gift. I smiled anyway. I said thank you. But deep down, it hollowed me out. It told me in the loudest, clearest way, you don't belong here. When my birthday came around, it barely registered. A cake from the grocery store, no presents, no special dinner, just another day. Everyone else's birthdays were events, balloons, decorations, trips to their favorite places. Mine was a reminder that I was the extra person in the house, the one nobody knew what to do with. I stopped inviting friends over. How could I? My home wasn't mine. It was a stage where everyone else played their roles perfectly. And I was the mistake in the background, even in my own room. I didn't feel safe. He'd barge in without knocking, point out the smallest mess, criticize the way I folded my clothes, accuse me of being ungrateful for the roof over my head. I started spending more and more time away, walking around the neighborhood, sitting in the library, hiding at school just to avoid going home. Anywhere felt better than that house, but no matter where I went, the weight followed me. The knowledge that eventually, I had to go back. Asterisk, the way he spoke to me wasn't just strict, it was degrading. He called me lazy, useless, ungrateful. He never said those words to his son or to my sisters, only me. He acted like I was some failed project he'd been forced to take on, some broken thing he had to tolerate because of my mother. There were times he humiliated me in front of others too. When his family came to visit, he'd show off my sisters, brag about how smart they were, how talented they were. His son was praised endlessly, held up like some shining example of everything good in the world. But when it came to me, he'd make little jokes. This one's always in trouble. Or he still hasn't figured out how to do things right. Everyone laughed, and I laughed too. Because what else was I supposed to do? Cry at the table? The worst part wasn't even the words, it was the way my mom smiled along with them. The way she let him speak about me like that, like it was okay, like it was true. She never stood up for me, never told him to stop. It was as if defending me would cost her too much, would crack the perfect picture she was desperate to protect. So I learned to stay silent, to swallow it all, to carry the weight alone. Asterisk, there were moments that broke me a little more each time, small moments, but they added up. Like the time my sisters were begging him to take them to the amusement park. He agreed instantly, smiling, telling them to grab their shoes. His son was already bouncing with excitement. I asked if I could go too. He looked me dead in the eye and said there wasn't enough room in the car. I stayed home that day, alone in the empty house, staring at the walls while my family laughed and screamed on roller coasters without me. Or the time I brought home a good grade in math, one of the only classes I felt proud of. I showed my mom, hoping for some recognition, but she barely looked before handing it to him. He glanced at it, shrugged, and said, "It's just one test. Don't get cocky." Then he went back to praising his son for drawing a picture that didn't even make. Moments like that piled up, brick by brick, until they built a wall inside me. A wall made of shame, loneliness, and this constant echo of a question I couldn't escape. Why me? Why do I have to be the one who doesn't belong? Why do I have to be the burden? I withdrew completely. At school, teachers noticed I was quieter, more distracted, but no one asked why. Friends stopped inviting me out because I always said no. I didn't have the energy to pretend everything was fine anymore. At home, I lived like a ghost. I ate quietly, spoke only when spoken to, spent hours locked away in my room. But no matter how much I tried to disappear, he still found ways to remind me I wasn't wanted. A harsh word in the hallway, a glare across the table, a reminder that I wasn't pulling my weight, that I should be grateful he even let me stay there. And my mom, she kept smiling, kept holding his hand, kept pretending everything was perfect. Sometimes I wondered if she even saw me anymore. Some of the memories still sting like fresh wounds. Even though I try to bury them, they come back at night, replaying in my head when I'm lying in the dark, and they all carry the same message. I wasn't part of them. One time, my school was hosting an award night. I wasn't an all-star student, but I had worked my ass off that semester and ended up getting recognized for improvement in science. It was the first time a teacher ever said my name in front of an audience. I looked out at the crowd and saw empty chairs where my mom and him should have been sitting. My sisters were home, probably playing with the toys he bought them, and his son was probably watching TV with him. No one came for me. I stood on that stage holding my certificate, smiling because I was supposed to. But inside I felt like I was disappearing. Then there was the night of my sister's birthday party. The house was filled with balloons, decorations, presents stacked, almost to the ceiling. They had invited her whole class, hired a clown, even rented one of those inflatable bouncy castles for the backyard. The laughter was so loud it rattled the windows, and me, I was in the kitchen, doing dishes, making sure plates didn't pile up while the party went on without me. I wasn't asked to join in. I wasn't even offered cake until hours later when the guests were gone and all that was left were scraps. My mom kissed my sister on the forehead, told her how special she was, and didn't even glance at me standing in the corner. But the worst humiliation came on a random Sunday. We were all sitting in the living room and he had just returned from shopping. He pulled out bags filled with clothes and shoes for his son, my sisters. They squealed with excitement, holding up their new things, twirling in front of the mirror. Then he turned to me and said, "You'll have to make do with what you have. You don't take care of your stuff anyway." Everyone laughed, my mom included. I forced a smile, but felt like my insides were caving in. That was the moment I realized even my mom wouldn't defend me anymore. Every day started the same way. Wake up, get my sisters ready, make sure they had everything for school. He never thanked me for it. If anything, he criticized me for being too slow or forgetting something. His son never had to lift a finger. But I was expected to do things right every single time, or else after school. I'd come home and head straight to my room. If I lingered in the living room, I'd get told I was in the way. If I sat at the kitchen table too long, I was accused of being lazy. Even watching TV was a risk. He'd change the channel. Say, I was hogging it, even though I had barely touched the remote. It was like every space in the house belonged to everyone else. And I was trespassing no matter where I stood. At dinner, I sat in silence. The conversation swirled around me, as some bragging about a video game, my sisters talking about school projects, him cracking jokes, my mom laughing at every word. If I tried to join in, I was ignored or shut down. Sometimes I'd just stop eating and stare at my plate until they noticed and told me to stop sulking. They didn't see that I wasn't sulking, I was vanishing. At night, I'd hear him telling his son bedtime stories, his voice soft and warm. Sometimes my sisters would run down the hall, giggling as he tucked them in, making them feel like the center of the universe. My room was quiet. No one came to check on me. No one said goodnight. The hardest part wasn't even the cruelty, it was the pretense to the outside world. We looked perfect. My mom posted pictures of us on social media, family outings, smiling, group shots, vacations where I was always shoved to the side or cropped out altogether. People commented, saying how lucky we were, how happy my mom looked, how beautiful the family was. No one saw what happened when the camera was put down. No one saw the way his smile faded the second his eyes landed on me. No one heard the words he whispered under his breath, sharp enough to cut. No one noticed the way I shrank into myself, smaller and smaller every year. Sometimes I wondered if I was going crazy, if maybe I was making it up. But then I'd remember the times he looked at me like I was dirt under his shoe, and I knew I wasn't imagining it. You can't imagine that kind of hate. Eventually, I stopped asking why doesn't he like me, and started asking why am I even here. I was 15, but I felt like I'd already lived a lifetime of being unwanted. My dad left. My mom ignored. My stepfather despised. My sisters loved me in their own way, but even they didn't understand. They had everything they needed in him, so why would they question it? I would lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, and the word kept echoing, burden. That's what I was to him, to my mom, maybe even to the whole world. The thought scared me at first, but then it became almost comforting. If I was a burden, maybe the best thing I could do for everyone was to disappear. It's strange how fast you can get used to being invisible. At first, I used to fight for space, for a seat at the table, for my mom's attention, for some small scrap of approval from him, but fighting just left me tired. After a while, I stopped expecting anything. I stopped hoping. It was easier to accept that I wasn't wanted than to keep banging my head against a wall. That never moved, but that acceptance wasn't peaceful. It was heavy. It sat on me like a weight that never let up. Every time I walked through the door, I felt it pressing harder, whispering in my ear, "You don't belong here. You're just a guest they can't get rid of. You're the mistake they tolerate because they have to." It wasn't just at home either. That word burden followed me everywhere. At school, When I didn't have money to join trips or buy new shoes like the other kids, I felt it. When friends asked why I never invited them over, I felt it. When teachers asked if everything was okay, and I lied, I felt it. It was like a second skin I couldn't peel off. Asterisk, the nights were the hardest. During the day, I could distract myself with schoolwork or walking around town, but at night, when the house went quiet, my thoughts got loud. I'd lie there staring at the ceiling, asking myself questions I couldn't answer. Why am I even here? Why couldn't Dad want me? Why can't Mom see me? Why does he hate me so much? Why am I the one left out? Some nights I'd cry into my pillow so no one would hear. Other nights I'd just stare into the dark, feeling nothing at all. The crying at least reminded me I was human, but the emptiness, that was worse. It felt like disappearing in slow motion, like piece by piece I was being erased. I wondered what would happen if I just wasn't there anymore. Would they notice? Would they care? Or would they breathe easier without me? Asterisk, it wasn't always the big humiliations that hurt the most. Sometimes it was the tiny things, the kind no one else would even notice. Like the time they all went out for ice cream, and I only found out because I saw the empty cups in the trash later. Or the way he locked his car when his son was inside, but never let me sit in the front seat. Or the time I was sick, really sick, shivering with a fever, and my mom tucked my sisters in first, made sure his son had his blanket, and only checked on me hours later. She stood in the doorway, asked if I was okay, then left before I could even answer. Little cuts. Over and over, until I was bleeding inside. Asterisk, one evening, we were all sitting in the living room. My sisters were on his lap, his son curled up beside him. They were laughing at some movie, the whole room glowing with warmth and joy. And me? I was in the corner, sitting on the floor with my back against the wall. It hit me then, harder than ever before. I'm not part of this family. I'm an outsider in my own home. And the most painful thought of all, maybe I never really was. Maybe I was just tagging along until they figured out a way to leave me behind. That night, when I went to bed, I whispered the question out loud for the first time. Why do I have to be the burden? Why couldn't it be anyone else? A silence that answered me was worse than any scream. Asterisk, school should have been a break, a place where I could breathe away from home, but it wasn't. At school, I was the kid who didn't have the right clothes, the kid who couldn't afford the latest shoes, the kid who never invited anyone over. Teachers praised my sisters for their projects, complimented them on their new outfits, smiled at his son when he came to pick them up. But me, I was background noise. I tried to blend in, keep my head down. But the truth is, kids notice when you're different. They notice when you can't buy lunch some days, when you wear the same hoodie over and over, when you never laugh at the right jokes because you're too busy thinking about how much you don't belong. And every time someone teased me for being quiet, or called me poor, or just ignored me, it all went back to the same thought. I am a burden. Not just at home. Everywhere. Asterisk, trips were the worst. The car would be filled with laughter and chatter, my sisters singing along to the radio, his son asking a million questions, and him smiling, engaging. Like the father everyone would dream of having, I sat in the back, squished against the window, headphones, and even if I wasn't listening to anything, just so I didn't have to hear how happy they all were without me. Every stop along the way, they'd take photos of him holding his son on his shoulders, my sisters hugging my mom. I was always on the edge of the frame, half-cropped, or sometimes not in the picture at all. It was like I wasn't even meant to be there, like I was just an extra ticket they had to buy because no one could leave me behind. Asterisk, even when I did chores, no one noticed unless I messed up. I vacuumed, washed dishes, folded laundry, made sure my sisters' backpacks were packed. But if I forgot something small, a dish left in the sink, a sock not folded, he'd explode, telling me I was lazy, that I contributed nothing. Meanwhile, his son could spill juice on the carpet and laugh about it, and everyone would just smile and clean it up. My sisters could forget their homework, and it was fine. But me, one mistake, and I was the failure of the house. I learned quickly that my worth wasn't measured by effort. It was measured by how invisible I could be. Asterisk, the house had a rhythm, laughter, TV shows, bedtime stories, the quiet murmur of parents talking in the kitchen. For everyone else, it was home. For me, it was a reminder. My room was cold, even when the heater was on. Not literally, but in the way that no warmth ever seemed to reach me. I'd lie awake for hours, listening to the sounds of their lives happening just a few feet away, and feel like I was living behind a wall of glass. I could see it, hear it, almost touch it, but I'd never be a part of it. And those endless nights, I'd ask myself the same question over and over. If I disappeared, would it really change anything? Would anyone notice? Would anyone care? Or would they finally get what they wanted? Less weight to carry, one less mouth to feed, one less problem to deal with. Asterisk, it didn't happen all at once. It was slow, like a candle burning down until nothing's left but smoke. The humiliations, the loneliness, the silence, they wore me down bit by bit. I stopped caring about school. I stopped eating as much. I stopped talking, even to my sisters. Because what was the point? And that word burden, it wasn't just what I felt anymore. It was what I believed I was. It was who I was. Every time I looked in the mirror, I didn't see myself. I saw the problem in their perfect picture, the flaw in their happiness, the extra piece no one needed. I wanted so badly to ask someone to help me, to tell me I wasn't useless, that I wasn't the problem. But who would I ask? My mom, who never saw, my stepfather, who hated me, my dad, who left and never looked back. There was no one. So the questions kept circling, darker every night. Why am I here? Why do I have to be the one that weighs everyone down? Why couldn't it be someone else? Why can't I just stop existing? Asterisk, birthdays became something I dreaded. Not mine, those were practically ignored, but theirs. His son always got some over-the-top party, streamers, a cake taller than my sister's. Gifts stacked higher than the table. My sister's 2 princess themes, matching outfits. Professional photos. When it came to me, my birthday was usually just a store-bought cake after dinner, if anyone remembered it all. No party, no presents. No one singing like they meant it. I'd watch them go all out for everyone else. Then look at my own empty corner of the calendar and think, maybe I don't deserve to be celebrated. Maybe I'm not worth it. Asterisk. Christmas was supposed to be magical. It wasn't. I still remember 1 year presents under the tree. Glittering lights, the whole living room glowing, my sisters tore into wrapping paper. Squealing over dolls and games. His son got a new bike. The kind kids brag about at school. And me, I got socks, a 3-pack of plain white socks. I told myself to be grateful, to not show how much it hurt. But when I saw my mom clapping for everyone else, her eyes shining with pride and not even glancing my way, something inside me cracked. It wasn't about the gift, it was about what it meant to them. I wasn't even worth the effort of pretending. Asterisk, even homework became a reminder of how alone I was. His son would sit at the table, him leaning over, helping with every math problem, praising every correct answer. My sisters he'd clap when they finished reading a page. Tell them how smart they were. Me. I did my homework alone, in my room, struggling with things I didn't understand. When I asked for help once, he snorted and said, "Figure it out yourself." My mom didn't even look up from her phone. I sat there staring at the paper until the words blurred. Eventually, I stopped asking. Eventually, I stopped trying. Asterisk, one night at dinner, he made a joke. It was about me, about how I was the extra mouth to feed. About how, thank God, I'm almost old enough to get a job and finally pay for myself. Everyone laughed, even my mom. I laughed too, because that's what you do when the joke is on you. But inside, it didn't feel like a joke. It felt like truth. It felt like he had finally said out loud what everyone else was thinking. I wasn't part of them. I was just a weight dragging them down. Asterisk, the nights got longer. I'd lie there in the dark, thinking about that word burden. It played on repeat in my head. Sometimes I'd imagine what it would be like if I wasn't there, how the house would feel lighter, how the laughter wouldn't have a shadow at the edge of the room. I imagined them smiling in photos without me, and it felt right. Like that's the way it was supposed to be. Other nights, I'd wonder what it would feel like to just stop. Stop thinking, stop feeling, stop existing. Maybe then I'd finally get to rest. Maybe then they'd finally be free of me. Asterisk, the question kept coming back, sharper every time. Why me? Why do I have to be the burden? I didn't choose this life. I didn't ask for divorced parents, or for my mom to meet someone who hated me, or for sisters who needed me more than I could give. I didn't ask to be born into this. And yet, somehow, I was the one paying the price. I was the one carrying the weight. I was the one made to feel like I shouldn't exist. The worst part, I was starting to believe them. There was one afternoon, when school let out early, I waited outside, backpack digging into my shoulders, watching cars pull up for everyone else. My sisters ran to his car, squealing as he waved at them, his son already in the front seat. They drove off laughing, music blasting. I was still standing there on the sidewalk. They had forgotten me. I walked home 45 minutes in the cold, hands shoved deep in my pockets, pretending the lump in my throat was from the wind. When I finally opened the door, they were sitting at the table eating pizza. My mom looked up, surprised, and said, "Oh, I thought you had a ride." That was it. No apology, no concern, just nothing. Report cards came out. I had worked hard, pulled my grades up, even managed an A in one class. I handed it to my mom, heart racing, waiting for some flicker of pride. She skimmed it, nodded, and set it on the counter. 10 minutes later, his son came bouncing in with his report card, lower grades than mine. Honestly, and my stepfather clapped him on the back, grinned, told him how proud he was. My mom joined in, ruffling his hair. I was still standing there, holding my breath, waiting for someone to say the same to me. They didn't. Dinner became a performance I didn't want tickets to. Conversations whirled around the table, jokes, stories, plans. My sisters argued playfully over dessert. His son bragged about his video game wins. My mom and stepfather laughed at me. I sat there pushing food around my plate. If I tried to speak, I was ignored or worse, told I was interrupting. After a while, I stopped trying. One night, I realized no one had even noticed I hadn't said a single word the entire meal. There was a family photo session once. A photographer came to the house. My mom was glowing, dressed up. My sisters in matching dresses, his son in a crisp button-down shirt. They lined up in front of the fireplace. I stepped closer, waiting for my turn. My mom glanced at me, then at him. He said, "Maybe just the 5 of us this time." I froze. My mom hesitated. For a second, just a second, then nodded. The camera flashed, capturing the perfect family. I wasn't in it. Sometimes it wasn't even actions. It was words, offhand comments that slipped out, almost casually, but cut deeper than anything else. "You're too much. You're always in the way. Why can't you be more like him? You're lucky we even keep you here." I laughed them off in the moment, but later, alone in my room, they echoed like screams. Part 34. The cracks inside. I was 15, but I felt ancient, worn out, like life had already decided what I was. There was no changing it. Every day, I carried this weight of being unwanted, unloved, unneeded. Every night, I lay in bed asking the same question over and over. Why do I have to be the burden? And the more I asked, the more I started to think there was only one way to finally stop being one. Asterisk. There came a night when it all felt too heavy. I was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, and I realized I wasn't really living anymore. I was just existing, taking up space in a house where no one wanted me. The word burden was louder than my own heartbeat. I thought about what it really meant. Weight, pressure, something unwanted that drags everything else down. That was me, not just at home, but everywhere. And if I really was just a weight on them, then maybe the kindest thing I could do for everyone was to let go. The thought didn't scare me the way I thought it would. It was almost calm, like slipping off a backpack you've carried too long. I imagined what it would be like if I wasn't here. How my sisters would grow up surrounded by love and never notice the empty chair at the table. How my mom would stop pretending to juggle me and everyone else. How my stepfather would finally get his perfect family without me ruining the picture. I even imagined the house itself, lighter somehow, freer, as if my absence would give them room to breathe, and me, I imagined quiet, no weight, no word, following me around like a curse, just nothing. In that moment, nothing sounded better than anything I had. I won't go into details about what I did or almost did that night, but I will say this, I was close, closer than I'd ever been, sitting there, shaking, wondering if anyone would even notice if tomorrow I wasn't around. And the scariest part, I couldn't find a reason why they would, not one. The only thing that stopped me was a sound my youngest sister giggling in her sleep, through the thin wall between our rooms. It was small, soft, but it hit me like a lightning bolt dot because as much as I felt like a burden, as much as I believed I was the problem, I realized my sisters didn't see me that way. To them, I was still big brother. I was still the one who braided their doll's hair, who tied their shoelaces, who whispered stories when the lights went out. And for the first time in a long time, I thought, maybe I'm not a burden to them. Maybe they need me. Maybe the only ones who would notice if I was gone are the only ones who still matter. That night didn't fix me. It didn't erase the word from my skin. Didn't make me feel wanted or loved by the people who should have cared, but it planted something else doubt that maybe, just maybe, the story I'd been told about myself wasn't the whole truth. Still, the question hasn't gone away. Even now, it lingers in the back of my head, whispering whenever the silence gets too loud. Why do I have to be the burden? And I don't have an answer. Not yet. Maybe I never will, but I'm still here. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough. Morning came with no miracles. The sun poured through my window like always. The world kept moving whether I wanted it to or not, but somehow, I was still here. I got out of bed, pulled on clothes that felt too big, and walked into a house that didn't feel like home but was still where I lived. I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror and barely recognized the tired eyes staring back. They held something fragile, a spark I thought was gone. That day, I did something small. I made breakfast for my sisters, not because anyone asked me to. Not because I wanted praise, but because I needed to do something good that didn't hurt. They smiled at me when I handed them their plates, and I caught a glimpse of myself in their eyes, not a burden, not invisible, but someone who mattered. It was a small moment, almost too easy to miss. But it stuck with me. Some days still feel like I'm drowning in that weight. The silence still feels thick. The loneliness still creeps in. But now, there's a crack in the darkness, a quiet hope that maybe I'm more than the burden I was told I was. I don't know what the future holds. I don't know if I'll ever feel truly loved by everyone in my life, but I'm holding on to the moments that remind me I'm still here for a reason. That question, why do I have to be the burden? It's still there. It's not gone. And maybe it never will be. But now, when it whispers, I don't let it swallow me whole. Instead, I hold on to the smallest truth I found in the darkest night. I'm still here. And that has to mean something. Asterisk, I'm not looking for pity. I'm not writing this so someone will fix me or wave a magic wand over my life. I'm writing because maybe there's someone out there who feels the same way I do, like they're invisible, unwanted, a burden. Maybe you're sitting alone in your room, asking yourself the same question. Why me? I don't have answers. I only have my story. And the hope that sharing it might make someone feel less alone. If you're reading this and you feel like I do, like you don't belong where you're just too much, I want you to know something. You're not a burden. You're not invisible. You matter, even if the people around you don't always see it. And if you're like me, still holding on by a thread, that thread can be enough to start finding your way. One small moment, one quiet hope, one day at a time. Because surviving doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're fighting. And that's something worth holding on to.